There are stories of beings who do not breathe, yet remain alive, of flying discs that crashed into the desert in the middle of a summer storm, only to be buried beneath a lie that has lasted more than half a century. You may have heard the name Roswell. You may have read somewhere about UFOs, about blurred photographs, and about secret conferences the government has never acknowledged. But what few have ever told you is that behind all the theories and all the debates, there was once a secret conversation between humans and an extraterrestrial being. And in that conversation, something was revealed, something that, if true, would change everything you thought you knew about life, and perhaps even make you realize that death is not as terrifying as we've always believed. So fasten your seatbelt as we dive into today's mystery. But first, you'll have incredible luck if you like and subscribe before this video ends. Within the European circles of research into UFOs and extraterrestrial life, there is one name that nearly everyone knows: Maximillien De Lafayette. For more than half a century, this man has published hundreds of books, covering a wide range of subjects, from cinema and music to quantum physics and artificial intelligence. But what stands out most are his writings on extraterrestrials and the hidden connections they are believed to have with Earth. He asserted that the objects humanity refers to as flying saucers were, in fact, not vehicles of transport at all, but multi-dimensional time machines capable of moving not only through physical space but across timelines themselves. And the beings commonly known as the small grays, with their pale skin, emotionless black eyes, and lack of facial expression, were not living organisms, but artificial biological entities designed to carry out missions in the harsh conditions of outer space. How could he possibly know all of this? To find the answer, we have to go back to the year 1947, to the moment of the Roswell incident, where he was one of the scientists granted direct contact with the extraterrestrial being. In the summer of 1947, as the United States was still recovering from the aftermath of World War II, a violent thunderstorm swept across the White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico. This area had long served as the strategic hub for the U.S. military's missile development, where hundreds of captured German V-2 rockets had been received and modified after the war. But in the midst of the storm, something unusual happened. At 9 p.m. on July 4th, a radar operator at White Sands Base recorded a bright object moving at an abnormally high speed. Just minutes later, a similar signal was detected at Roswell Airfield, a site that would later become the center of one of the most controversial incidents of the century. Given the rising tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union at the time, any anomaly in the skies was treated as a potential threat. A rapid response team was immediately deployed. F-80 Shooting Star jets were launched, heading toward the unknown coordinates to intercept the unidentified flying object. But what happened next left even the most experienced pilots questioning their own senses. According to reports, the object disappeared, only to reappear moments later, this time dozens of kilometers away. It made no sound, left no vapor trail, and seemed to defy every known law of physics. The F-80's maximum speed was 933 kilometers per hour, yet the pilots confirmed that the object they were chasing far surpassed anything human technology was capable of at that time. A few days later, in the early morning of July 7th, a rancher named Mac Brazel, living on the outskirts of Roswell, discovered a scattering of strange debris across his grazing land. He described the material as incredibly thin, almost weightless, and yet impossible to cut or burn. Most astonishingly, when bent or deformed, it would return to its original shape, something that science would only begin to conceptualize decades later under the name shape memory metal. News of the wreckage quickly reached Roswell Airfield. On July 8th, the military issued a stunning press release. The United States Army has recovered a flying disc that crashed near Roswell. The announcement sent shockwaves across the country. Local newspapers printed the headline in bold. People talked of little else. Researchers and skeptics alike were left speechless. But just 6 hours later, the U.S. military abruptly convened an emergency press conference and issued a retraction. It was not a flying disc, but merely a weather balloon. And then, like a heavy velvet curtain slowly descending over a stage, the story went silent. The newspapers stopped reporting. Radio broadcasts were edited. Those involved became strangely quiet. Yet there were some who would not so easily accept that silence. In 1978, a physicist and aerospace expert named Robert Wood quietly began reopening the Roswell case. Robert was no stranger to the world of defense technology. He had worked for Douglas Aircraft, and later McDonnell Douglas, one of America's largest military contractors, known for developing legendary fighter jets like the F-15 Eagle. What few people knew, however, was that in 1968, this very company had secretly funded a $500,000 research project focused on unexplained aerial phenomena, with the Roswell incident at the heart of it. And the man chosen to lead the investigation was none other than Robert Wood. But Robert knew he couldn't pursue the investigation alone. He brought on a young and passionate physicist to join him, Stanton Terry Friedman. And it was Stanton Friedman who would later dedicate his entire life to uncovering the truth behind Roswell. In June of 1978, during a small conference in the suburbs, Friedman met Major Jesse Marcel, a former intelligence officer with the United States Air Force, and the very first person to reach the crash site of the unknown object in Roswell in 1947. Jesse Marcel stated plainly, "What I recovered from the site could not have been a weather balloon. It was something that had never existed on Earth. To this day, I still don't know what it was." Alongside Marcel, another witness emerged, Colonel Thomas Dubose, who had been present at the now infamous press conference decades earlier. He admitted that the photo showing the so-called weather balloon had been staged. It was an order from above, and he had simply followed instructions. The deeper Stanton Friedman dug, the more pieces of the puzzle began to surface. He uncovered testimonies from numerous individuals who had lived in Roswell at the time of the incident. One of them was Glenn Dennis, who had worked at the local funeral home. He recalled that on July 8, 1947, the military had called requesting 3 small metal coffins. When he delivered them to the base, he saw military vehicles surrounding the area, and there was a palpable sense of secrecy in the air. A nurse he knew later confided in him that she had been assigned to assist in the examination of bodies that were not human. These beings emitted a strange odor, had thin, hairless skin, and glossy black eyes unlike anything she had ever seen on Earth. Friedman didn't stop at collecting witness accounts. He began mapping out locations, timelines, and the possible flight path of the object, cross-referencing all of it with declassified military documents released years later. And what he discovered gave even him chills. The object had not crashed in a single location. It may have broken apart mid-air, with a second impact site located just a few kilometers from where the initial debris had been found. When the U.S. military reached the crash site at Roswell, they did not find only scattered debris. They recovered 2 lifeless bodies, one being with severe injuries, and one entity that had survived. The surviving being was described as small in stature, with pale gray skin and deep, unblinking black eyes. It did not speak, barely moved, yet showed no signs of fear. And what astonished the military doctors the most was that this being had a detectable heartbeat. But it did not breathe, and it appeared to require no food or water to stay alive. An officer present at the Walker Air Force Base Hospital later recalled that they began to sense thoughts coming from the entity. Vague words, images, and emotions surfacing in their minds without any sound being exchanged. At first, it was dismissed as stress-induced hallucinations following such a traumatic event. But when more and more personnel began reporting the same experience, the government convened a team of special experts. And so, the first conversation between humans and an extraterrestrial being took place in early 1948. As the specialists attempted to communicate using sound conversion equipment, the being continued to transmit concepts far beyond the boundaries of human understanding. They were told, "We are not physical life forms. We do not breathe. We do not eat. We do not sleep. And we do not feel pain. We simply borrow a physical frame to appear in your world." One of the scientists at the time exclaimed, "If you're not a living being, then why can we see you?" The response came calmly. "You are machines as well. You exist through bone, muscle, blood, nerves, and bioelectricity. You eat, inhale, and excrete. We exist through cosmic energy. Your body is only a biological shell. Your soul is no different from ours." It is difficult to imagine seasoned scientists sitting silently in front of a small, fragile-looking being, only to be confronted with a truth they had never dared consider, that humankind might merely be a primitive version of a more advanced form of existence. And when asked whether it felt sadness over the loss of its own kind in the crash, the being replied only, "Death is a concept that does not exist." No one in that room remained emotionally intact. They were no longer simply standing before a different species. They were facing the greatest question humanity has ever asked: what are we? And if there is something beyond death, then where is it that we are truly headed? According to the confidential manuscripts revealed by Maximillien De Lafayette, the being from beyond the stars made one thing very clear. We did not just arrive on Earth. We have been here for a very long time, and we are not here to observe. You are not an experiment. We are here to help you pass through a critical stage in your evolution. According to them, the universe is home to countless forms of life, countless civilizations. But there are also souls that fail to adapt to the supreme spiritual laws of balance, compassion, and reverence for life. These souls instead choose to act from base instincts, waging war, creating division, abusing knowledge to dominate, and using technology not to heal, but to destroy. And for that reason, a decision was made at the highest levels of the universe. Earth was chosen, not because it was special, but precisely because it was isolated, distant, and harsh enough to serve as a proving ground for misguided souls. Earth was selected because it holds a rich ecosystem, diverse climates, terrains, and species, creating the ideal conditions for each soul to face hundreds of thousands of different situations. In these experiences, the soul is meant to learn emotional balance, to rise above desire, to confront fear, and ultimately, to realize that existence is not merely material. According to the alien being, time on Earth moves much more slowly than on other planets. This is not a physical discrepancy, but a spiritual mechanism. Time slows here so that the soul has enough moments to reflect, to regret, to correct, and to choose again. They explained that beyond Earth's atmosphere exists an invisible plasma energy belt. It cannot be seen by the naked eye, nor can it be detected by current technology. But it functions as a barrier, preventing exiled souls from leaving the planet. At the time, some believed it was merely a philosophical metaphor. But decades later, as the world entered a period of unprecedented upheaval, people began to look back on that prophecy with a new sense of seriousness. According to Maximillien De Lafayette, the era in which the seal, also known as the invisible plasma belt encircling Earth, begins to weaken, is also the era in which humanity starts coming face to face with phenomena that lie far beyond the reach of modern science. One of the earliest signs was a sudden surge in USO activity, unidentified submerged objects, encounters with unknown craft not in the skies, but beneath the ocean's surface. Unlike UFOs, which are often spotted in the air, USOs appear and vanish silently from deep within the sea. As described by Lafayette, these objects possess the ability to ascend from beneath the water at staggering speeds without creating any splash. Not a single droplet clings to their surface, as though some invisible layer of energy surrounds them, shielding them entirely from contact with the material world. Even more concerning is that the number of witnesses reporting USO sightings has been rising exponentially. Areas such as the Bermuda Triangle, the Caribbean Sea, the coastlines of Chile, and even the waters off Japan have become focal points for incidents that federal authorities repeatedly avoid addressing in public. This increase in such phenomena, Lafayette argued, is a clear signal that Earth is entering a transitional period, a phase in which humanity must confront immense environmental, military, and spiritual upheavals. These are the final tests before the Great Seal dissolves. That prophecy was never meant to instill fear, but to offer each individual a choice. Because if the soul truly is a form of existence beyond the material, then this final test is not a war between civilizations. It is an inward reckoning, a confrontation within each of us, a test of our choices, a test of compassion, and a test of whether we can rise above fear and instinct and remember who we truly are. If you've ever heard a strange story that no one has been able to explain, or if you've experienced something that changed the way you see this world, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like to keep exploring mysteries like this one, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Thank you for staying with us until the very end.